All right, welcome back to So to Speak, the free speech podcast, where every other week we take an uncensored look at the world of free expression through personal stories and candid conversations. This is also a fireside chat for those of our listeners who've never checked out our YouTube channel. We've got a sometimes weekly YouTube video that we put together about latest fire happenings. So this will also be found there in video format if you're interested in checking that out. But I'm here today joined by three of my very distinguished colleagues, also happen to be three of the longest serving colleagues at FIRE.
Which I think I said, it's amazing since I'm 25 that I'm one of the longest serving colleagues. I mean, how did that happen?
We're missing Robert Shibley, our executive director. He's coming up to FIRE's Philadelphia headquarters from Raleigh, Durham, and I guess the weather has grounded him in Durham.
He's encountering Philly airport greatness.
Yeah, it's no good. So he's unfortunately not going to get to hang out with us today, but we do have...
We can make fun of him in his absence. I think that's probably the FIRE way.
Good idea.
We do have the head honcho, Greg Lukianoff, the president and CEO of the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education. Up, down, up from our Washington, D.C. office. Will Creeley, you'll all be very familiar with Will. He's our senior vice president.
I wanted to point out, I don't want to conflate longest serving with distinguished, right? Longest serving, I think, is true. Distinguished, we can
yeah. Well, we are wearing suits and ties today because it is our staff retreat. If you hear people in the background, that's why it's very rowdy here today. Oh, Greg's not wearing a tie.
Fireside Chat viewers, the regulars will be disappointed that I'm not wearing that one gray shirt that I always seem to wear when we're filming, but today I classed it up. So.
My husband, with guys, it's easy because you get the suit dress code. With women, my husband laughed this morning when I explained that I had to wear something suit compatible, which means it would not look out of place standing next to guys in suits.
Right, right.
Oh, and Sam, you were on one of our last podcasts with Professor Keith Whittington, also a regular on Fireside Chats. You are our Vice President of Policy Research.
Yep.
So I wanted to do this because it's the end of the school year. It's a time for reflection. It's also Throwback Thursday.
Yeah.
And I wanted to look back not on the 2017 school year, 2017-2018 school year, but back on FIRE history at large. We're coming up on our 20th anniversary, I believe, next year. And I wanted to talk with you all, who I think between the three of you probably have
4,000 years.
4,000 years of experience doing this work, and get your sense of what your most memorable cases have been here at FIRE. I was almost going to use the word favorite, but talking about favorite cases when you're in the civil liberties space isn't the right adjective to use.
Sometimes favorite and most horrifying get confused.
Yeah. And I was thinking actually about some of my most memorable cases in the past, and some of them were private cases. A lot of our viewers and listeners probably aren't aware that, I don't know, what is it?
They don't know the half of it.
It's like
you guys don't know what happens to things. We end things before you even hear about them.
Well, this is our second take doing this, actually, because the first one we had some technical difficulties. Apparently with Audition, if you unplug the headphones, you lose the audio, and it stops recording. But this is our second take doing it. And the first take, it just so happened that day we won 2 private victories before noon.
We did.
And
rack them up. You guys don't know.
Yeah, and they don't know. And some of my most memorable cases were those private victories that only us and the people we help at FIRE know about.
You're not going to hear about any of those here today.
But Greg, let's start with you. I mean, you joined FIRE in 2001.
Yep.
What was your first case that you worked on?
Oh boy. Okay, so I've told this story a lot, but I came out. Had a happy life out in San Francisco. I'd graduated from law school the year before, and I came out to find an apartment on September 11th, 2001, and I arrived at the Philadelphia airport at 9:10 a.m. on September 11th. And, I just thought the Philly airport was kind of quiet and not very busy. And then I'm getting in the van to go to the hotel, and I find out the attacks have happened. And so I got stuck in Philadelphia for a whole week. I couldn't go home because they stopped air traffic, which people don't even remember in a lot of cases. There was no air traffic for many days after the attacks. And so almost all of my first cases were in some way related to 9/11.
9/11.
So the very first letter I ever wrote was for the not particularly sensitive professor at University of New Mexico who joked on 9/11 that anyone who can blow up the Pentagon has my vote. Now, he apologized to high heaven for that, but he wasn't willing to work with us to make sure that he didn't lose his job over it. And I had a long heart-to-heart with him on the phone, saying like, listen, they're gonna figure out a way to get rid of you after this. Like, if you gotta fight, you're much safer out in public. And early in my career, I got something that people rarely get, is I had an article, he wrote an article that following summer saying, you know, I should have listened to FIRE, I'm out of a job, they did figure out a way to get rid of me. So in that case, that was someone being insensitive about it. But we had all
We hear that from professors a lot, though, and students as well. They don't want to go public, but often going public sort of insulates you from
retaliation.
Yeah, you're much safer in public than you are, and I've repeated this a million times, and it's just true. But other cases involve students getting told, or being told to take down like American flags, or employees being told to take down American flags. There was at Central Michigan University, students were told to take down the cover of the San Francisco Chronicle that showed the burning towers and said "bastards" on top of it, because people might think it was offensive. So there was just this crazy influx of cases right around 9/11. And even though I was a First Amendment person, you know, and that's what I went to law school to specialize in, I worked at the ACLU, when tempers are that hot and everybody's that upset, and understandably so, when your first cases are ones where people, you know, are calling you either like anti-American or pro-terrorist or like whatever, it was in some ways a difficult sort of training to come into it. But
well, let me ask you this question. So tempers are kind of hot on campus right now.
Sure.
The free speech debate, for better or for worse, I'd argue for worse, is become embroiled in the culture wars. Do you think tempers were hotter after 9/11 on campus for the free speech debate, or do you think they're worse now?
I mean, for the immediate aftermath of it, I don't think you could get much more intense than the immediate aftermath, but I think it mellowed fairly quickly. It was a couple of months of really intense cases, and then
and it was just you and like what, 2 other staffers at that point?
It was a tiny organization at the time. I was the only lawyer on staff up until Robert being added, which could be
2003. So 2 years,
which could be kind of frustrating sometimes. But the I have a little bit of a contrarian point of view, though, on what actually happened on 9/11 with regards to professors' attitudes about academic freedom. I think it was a moment that kind of reminded a lot of people on campus that censorship will not always be on their side. Yeah. And I think it actually improved, for at least a short period of time, professors and students understanding that, oh, wait a second, I can be the one that they're calling for their head.
Yeah.
And I think we've gotten so far away from a reminder like that. There's, you know, a whole generation, I think, like of students and faculty who oftentimes just assume that they'll always be, they'll always be on the side of the angels and never the actual the censored ones.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point. I think about Ari Fleischer, former press secretary, saying something in the months following the attacks, like Americans need to watch what they say. There was some kind of, I may be paraphrasing a little bit, but I don't think so. I think he pretty much said something like, people need to watch what they say. I think he was responding
for what reason?
To jokes. It was some kind of joking after 9/11, and it was like, it was the beginning of the whole see something, say something ethos, and which is actually, as we found out, patented by the government. The government has a trademark on see something, say something.
Wow.
Yeah, how'd you find that out?
Actually doing research for a certain book that's coming out. And anyway, so like there was that kind of pushback, and I'm thinking, well, 9/11, I was 300 yards away from the towers when they fell and lived 10 blocks away, so I have that day viscerally burned into my memory, as so many folks do.
Yeah, I mean, you're considered like a 9/11 survivor.
I'm on the list.
Yeah.
That's really overblown, but yeah, but I lived close enough. So
yeah, you weren't in the towers.
Wow.
Yeah, you could smell it till January. Anyways, but I remember that there was this real influx of I don't want to say like nationalistic fervor, but immediate rally around the flag feeling from folks that teetered on the kind of anti-civil liberties push that folks saw post Pearl Harbor. When at wartime, particularly when the fight is taken to our shores, people say, you know what, internment. You know what, watch what you say. Some things are out of bounds, and for you to get that experience working for FIRE right away. I've been sitting on this bad joke for about 45 seconds. Trial by fire. I'm going to leave it right there. But you know what I mean? Like that must have been a hell of a thing.
It was pretty intense.
It's an interesting point because, now we deal a lot with calls for bans on hate speech on campus. And one of the things that I often say about that is, it's people in power who are going to define what hate speech is. And how do you think the current administration, for example, would define hate speech? How would you feel if anything deemed unpatriotic were deemed hate speech? And it sounds like what you're saying is that after 9/11, people actually did get a taste of what it might be like if suddenly unpatriotic speech were banned.
Sam, when did you join FIRE?
I joined in May of 2005, so it's my lucky 13th anniversary of FIRE this month.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
What was your first case that you remember working on?
So, I mean, a lot of my work is on campus speech codes and continues to be on campus speech codes. So although I started in May 2005, I didn't actually write a letter to a university about a case of censorship until I think 2006 or 2007. And that was one of our first social media cases, which has also, I mean, the rise of social media has brought about a huge shift in our work.
What was it, a MySpace case?
Because nowadays, it was not a MySpace case. It was Facebook, but it was back when you had to have a .edu address to get a Facebook account. And it was an offensive Halloween party invitation posted on Facebook by a student at Johns Hopkins. And Hopkins absolutely threw the book at this kid. I mean, they suspended him, they sentenced him to sensitivity training, they, community service, all of this stuff.
And he was a freshman, right, if I remember correctly?
No. So he was a junior, but
he started when he was 15, right?
He started when he was 15, right. So basically Hopkins had accepted this kid, this sort of prodigy, and then essentially punished him egregiously for being immature. And we wrote to the university. This was another instance where the student himself did not want to fight that hard, so we were a bit limited in what we could do, and ultimately his punishment was reduced.
What exactly did he say or do?
It was a Halloween in the Hood
it was like
party.
Yeah, it was like something about 40s and stuff. All the classic.
Yeah, I mean, it was a theme party that people considered racially offensive.
Yeah, it was like gangster rap stereotypes. I remember.
And he had thrown the party or something?
He was like
he was like the frat social chair or something. So, I mean, they absolutely threw the book at him, but that was really sort of the first time that a posting on social media gave rise to one of our cases, which is now a huge thing. And it's funny when you were talking about the professor who, said in an email that anyone who can blow up the Pentagon gets his vote. I'm thinking nowadays it would have been a tweet. Because the cases we've had like that in the more recent years are always on Twitter or Facebook, and the impact is even further magnified by the fact that it's not just the people on campus who are seeing that email and maybe forwarding it to their friends, but tens of thousands of people.
Not only nowadays would it have been a tweet, which is a really interesting observation. I'm wondering if nowadays it would make an impact. I don't know.
An impact in what way?
Well, I mean, I wonder if we've raised the bar or lowered the bar for what gets considered.
I don't know. I mean, Randa Gerard, I feel like it's on par with.
So all I want for Christmas is white genocide, right? That's Chickarella Maher. I guess. I mean, I guess maybe anybody who blows up the Pentagon's got my vote. Maybe
right after 9/11.
Right after. Okay, fair enough.
I think it would still draw attention.
I think it would be. I think we've lowered the bar, particularly when there's a partisan group that can say, "I'm really mad about this."
I'll take to my Twitter account afterwards.
We'll put this out over Twitter.
But I realized something. We had a case at Orange Coast College last year that involved a professor being recorded for doing sort of an anti-Trump calling him a terrorist in class, and a student had recorded it and published it or published quotes from it. And the thing that I only recently remembered was one of the early cases for FIRE was a professor at Orange Coast College named Professor Hurlson, who was accused by students of pointing at Muslim students in class and saying, "You flew the planes into the World Trade Center." And fortunately, someone had recorded the class, so we actually found out that what he was saying was nothing like that. It was him saying, taking responsibility for condemning acts of violence that are done in the name of your faith, and it was completely measured and not singling anybody out. And that's ultimately how he went from being suspended immediately with no due process to being eventually reinstated. But it was amazing to see that the roles completely reversed. And in this case, the student was getting in trouble for a rule that I'm willing to bet they probably passed in the wake of the Hurlson case, saying that you can't record professors.
If we're taking a trip down a FIRE memory lane, I have to point out that Orange Coast College also gave rise to one of my favorite PR headlines ever from the early days of FIRE. Yes. And, after a case there, it may have been that one, the president of the college left, and the PR headline was, the bell tolls for, Orange Coast College president, not the Liberty Bell. And I would like to make an on-camera plea to Nico, our communications director, to bring back the colorful PR headlines.
We do that sometimes. Not so much in PRs, but in blog posts.
We have used it in blog posts.
Yep.
Yeah. It is a classic.
Will, when did you start at Fire? You were an intern first, like I was.
Yeah.
Best legal intern I ever had.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you very much. We've had some damn good ones. We got a couple good ones right now.
Yeah.
And thanks to all the former legal.
Around here
Yeah, we have got a bunch of former legal interns on staff now. Azar, Mary, Laura.
I was a during the year intern because I did my pro bono hours at Penn.
There you go.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
We should get a class photo sometime. My first case at Fire. I think the
first was 2007.
Oh yes, 2005. Summer 2005. I was interning for Greg. Well, actually, you know what? It was summer 2004.
Oh yeah.
Interning for you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the next summer, I spent a summer at the FCC, Federal Communications Commission, which was fascinating, but also impressed upon me that what I really liked about Fire was I was working directly with folks. FCC was really interesting as a window into how the government works.
Who was the chairman?
Boy, I don't remember who the chairman was. I worked for a commissioner named Copps, Michael Copps, and it was really an education. But Fire, what I liked about Fire and what I like about civil liberties work in general, but particularly the work we do, is that you can make an impact on somebody's life very, very quickly, efficiently, and in a way that lasts, right? I mean, and that brings me to the case I want to talk about, is the case of Hayden Barnes.
Sure, yeah.
2007. So I'd been at Fire for a full calendar year. Then I joined in the fall of 2006. And I remember Hayden's case came in. He didn't submit the case to us, but we found about it through local news media reports.
Which we often do.
Right. I think it was like the ABC affiliate in near Valdosta, Georgia, which is right by the Florida Panhandle. And we saw a local news report about a student who had been expelled for protesting. And we thought, wait a second, this sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And long story short, anybody who doesn't know the Hayden Barnes case should press pause on this right now, go to Fire's website, read up on the Hayden Barnes saga, which spans 8 years all told.
Well, or just read the first book.
That's right.
Unlearning Liberty, like it's such a horrifying case.
Right. So buy the book, read the book, but check out the Hayden Barnes case.
Revenues go to Fire.
Right, and revenues do go to Fire. So check it out. Long story short, we had a student expelled for peacefully protesting the planned construction of a parking garage on campus. He was an environmentally minded student, most civically engaged student I maybe have ever met. He was a one-man community organization. He was putting up flyers. He was, phone banking. He was writing letters to the editor, and he earned.
When he was not an EMT.
Right, when he was not a decorated EMT, he earned the ire of the university president, who told him in a private conversation that the parking garage was to be part of his legacy, and told him to knock it off, like quit with all the protesting, kid.
Hour and a half meeting.
Yeah, yelling at him. And Hayden posted on his Facebook page a homemade collage that he had put together. I think it looks like it's slapped together in like MS Paint.
Yeah.
And he put it up, and it was something about the Zakari, which is the president's last name, Memorial Garage. He also named the environmental student group that wasn't pulling their weight in protesting the garage. And for this, he was given, 48 hours to leave campus, had a note snuck under his door, declared a clear and present danger to campus.
Clear and present danger.
And he was expelled.
Yep.
And holy smokes, I mean, that did not, it didn't get any clearer from me as a clarion call for the work that we do at Fire, the importance of the work that we do than this case. I mean, that was all of it.
Well, it was funny, like the first discussions of it, because it was one of those cases that made us also aware of how easy it is to miss one of these things. Right. It was a tiny little affiliate station.
Yeah.
We got one story about it. It actually had been going on since the previous spring, and of course, when we get a case that looks that cut and dry, our response as good lawyers is to go, well, maybe there's something we don't know about this, or maybe this is BS, or maybe he killed somebody or something.
Yeah, yeah.
And the more we looked into it, the more we're like, this is nuts. This is so clear cut. There's such a crazy abuse.
Yeah.
What I love about Hayden's story too is that he went on to become a lawyer, which
changed his life. Yeah.
Right. If I'm not mistaken, is directly attributable to his experiences.
Oh yeah.
I think he said as much. Hi Hayden, if you're watching.
he follows everything Fire does. I see him on Twitter.
Yeah, no, that was for me the moment where I thought, okay, I picked the right career. This is good. And can't mention this story without saying thank you to Bob Korn-Revere and the folks at Davis Wright Tremaine. This was kind of our initial work with them, that Greg had met Bob and was describing the case to him, and Bob was enraged, as I recall.
Well, Bob was also, he was like, seriously?
Yeah.
And we met at Union Station sometime in late 2007. That was the first time I ever met Bob. And, you know, he was like, yes, I'd absolutely love to litigate this. Not knowing that it would, even though it was such a clear-cut case, it took years and years. What was it, 9 years?
2 trips up to the 11th Circuit. Yeah, I think it was 8 years all told. Happy ending. You know, spoiler alert, Hayden wins.
Yeah.
And and that's the case that kind of sparked the relationship between Fire and Bob Corn Revere, Ronnie London, Lisa Zuckerman at Davis Wright Tremaine, and they've gone on to rack up, at last count, I want to say it's 9 victories in our Stand Up for Speech litigation project. So yeah, that was a big one.
I was listening to Bob Corn Revere speak at one of our annual summer conferences, Fire Student Network conference, and he was telling me about, you know, just how impressed he was with Hayden as a plaintiff in the case. Hayden, I guess, according to Bob, had a fear of flying, but he also wanted to be at all of his hearings. And he wanted to travel the country, I guess, and, you know, be involved in the case. And so what he did is he enrolled in one of these airline programs for people who are afraid of flying, where they slowly acclimate you to airline flying through like exposure therapy, more or less. You'll do a 30-minute flight, a 45-minute, hour-and-a-half flight, and that's how he sort of got comfortable flying, because I don't know if he was still in Georgia during all of the litigation. He's moved around a couple of times. But he was committed.
He's an incredibly impressive person, and I remember just being struck by what he had already accomplished at age 18 or whenever it was when we had come in to contact with him. Yeah, just an extraordinary case.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I always find so amazing about that case is that there are arguments that we never want to tell university general counsels, but that automatically put you get the sympathy of everybody around you. So one of them is to say that I felt in fear of being killed by this guy, and basically like what the president and what the administration was trying to get us to believe was that this guy was a clear and present danger, basically like he was going to go killing people. But they couldn't have picked a worse person to try to put this on, because you know like
Buddhist,
Shambhala Buddhist, you know, we mentioned before, decorated EMT, believer in nonviolence. He's on record for all this kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, you're not really going to. And also, I always point this part out. They try to make this argument with a straight face, but they also slip the note under his door. And if you think someone is an actual physical danger, exactly.
Yeah, and you're not giving him 48 hours to leave campus.
Listen, you crazy murderer. Yeah, let's take some time, you know, and then take a couple days, and please, you know.
So speaking of kicking students out of their dorm room, Robert Shibley, who unfortunately can't be with us today because of a delayed flight, really wanted me to talk about the Tim Garneau University of New Hampshire case. Tim Garneau, I believe he was a freshman in the dorms. He got really fed up with people taking the elevator to the first floor.
Yes, he did.
I live on a 35-floor building. I get fed up with people.
Hey, remember we had in the office the fire was in before this one.
Yeah.
They put in a school, some sort of like school medical technician program or something on the first floor of the building.
Yes, they
and
did.
For some fire code reason, the stairs were not open. So those students all had to take the elevator to the first floor. And I understood every ounce of Tim Garneau's frustration as, you know.
I think he was on like the 7th floor, and he was mad that people weren't just taking the elevator up 1 floor. They're taking it down 1 floor, and he really got obsessed with like, why can't you just take the stairs on this?
Well, he got so upset that he decided he was going to put up a flyer. This is 2004, and I've got a little prop here, which Robert encouraged me to print out, which is his flyer. And it says 9 out of 10 freshman girls gain 10 to 15 pounds. Kind of insensitive, but he says, but there is something you can do about it. If you live below the 6th floor, take the stairs. And I think you said he lived on the 7th floor. Convenient. He said in the flyer, not only will you feel better about yourself, but you will also be saving us time and won't be sore on the eyes. Again,
sore on the eyes. It's so 19. I always think it's so 1950s. It's like 1957.
And then so there's some clip art here. But for this, he was kicked out of the dorm.
Very 1980s workout wear.
Okay, he wasn't just kicked out of the dorm. He got 2 years probation. He was sentenced to mandatory psychological counseling, which is always one of the punishments that I'm like, that's insane to do that. That he was kicked out of the dorm, had to live out of his car.
And I've got actually a picture of Tim next to his car. I think it's like a 94 Civic or something.
That's not a good sleeping car.
He was given something like 12 books to read. He had to write like an apology essay. Like, they really threw the book at this kid. And so and this is University of New Hampshire. This is a school bound by the First Amendment. Which
I feel compelled to note has since reformed its ways and is actually now our most recent green light school. So thank you, University of New Hampshire.
Which for new listeners means they have no policies that on their face infringe upon First Amendment protections.
But the and so we were writing letters being like, this is not a close case. I mean, Nazis have First Amendment rights. People who are insensitive about the freshman 15 have First Amendment rights. But the University of New Hampshire would not back down. And the thing that really won this case was that we sent out the press release to a bunch of outlets, including The Daily Show, the then not exactly new Daily Show, but like when Jon Stewart was still on it. And University of New Hampshire got a call from The Daily Show, and the next day the university was like, "Oh, never mind."
Wow.
So what a difference they could make when they actually called people. It was one of the big lessons in how media can actually.
Yeah, we work in the court of public opinion.
Yep.
We try and work with the carrot approach by working on a lot of these cases privately. Say, this is what we believe happened here. This is why it's wrong. Do the right thing. If that doesn't happen, we escalate it to the court of public opinion.
Yeah.
It has been funny since then, though, because like I think of this as an extremely clear-cut case. But there was someone who read my book on learning liberty. And she came back like, I really liked the case, but I was really uncomfortable with the University of New Hampshire one because it was fat shaming. And I'm like, it's nowhere near the line of unprotected speech, though.
Right.
So it's interesting how kind of like norms have shifted to some degree. Whereas back in, I think it was actually 2003, where people thought this was just
it was 2003 or 2004. I don't remember exactly.
Crazy case.
One thing, I mean, maybe this would be interesting to talk about for a second. One thing, everybody, I tell folks we hire, at some point you're going to defend speech that you don't like.
Oh yeah.
Right.
So you're in your second degree back blackout.
That's right. That's how it's. I mean, boy, you might even do it 3 or 4 times in a day. I mean, IRDP meetings where we do the daily case intake, you could get hit with five jaw-droppingly insensitive things in the morning. Doesn't change the analysis, right? I mean, readers of your book, I'm sure the same way. There's going to be some part of Unlearning Liberty where they're going to be like, "Ooh,
well, and that's
not nice."
And that's one of these crazy things. I remember saying this to Nadine Strawson at some point. He was the president of the ACLU. I'm like, defending speech you agree with is like cheating.
Oh man!
Like essentially, like if you're just defending the side you agree with, that's congratulations.
It's like
it's a hobby.
Yeah.
As Jon
Preaching to the
Stewart said.
choir.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like the opposite of eating the bug brittle that I ate.
Someone brought to our office some like chocolate-coated
Bug brittle.
Can't do it.
And some kind of worm.
Crickets or
And
something.
cricket meal tortilla chips.
So defending
can't
speech
do
you
it.
don't like is like eating the bug brittle. If you only defend the speech you like, it's like eating potato chips all day.
I really, actually, it's one thing I've really loved about FIRE, though, is really early on, Emmett Hogan, a former beloved ex-employee, was very Catholic when he worked at FIRE, and we had a case where someone had actually gone on like an old school anti-Catholic rant, and it didn't even occur to him for a second not to immediately jump to the student's defense. And I'm like, that's and I've always admired that about the kind of people we attract.
Yeah, you got to be able to do it.
Hey, what time are we at? 11:37. Okay, to hell with it. Yeah, there's 2 more cases I want to talk about because we talked about the Hayden Barnes case in 2007. When you think of banner years for FIRE, you think of 2014, the disinvitation pushes, you think of all the student protests that were happening in 2015, and then you think about 2007, because you had the Hayden Barnes case, you had the Keith John Sampson case at IUPUI.
San Francisco State.
San Francisco State
and
University.
John had just happened, or was about to happen?
Henley.
Was that the Brandeis case?
Brandeis
and then you had Delaware.
And you had University of Delaware.
Yeah.
So and the funny thing about 2007 was
That'll go over all of our listeners' heads, but we'll dive into some of them.
We can provide links to all these. These are a lot of the craziest cases I've seen certainly in my career. All happened in the same year. Yeah. And of course, the summer before all this happened, I'm like, you know what? I think things are getting better on campus, which I've learned to never say again because it means that things are just about to get a lot worse.
So the University of Delaware case was another one of the early cases I worked on, and that was one where the residence halls had this curriculum, this mandatory curriculum for students in the residence halls that literally they referred to as a treatment for incorrect attitudes and beliefs. And the goal was really to reshape students' entire way of thinking on, issues of conscience.
How did they do that, for example?
They had these really intrusive one-on-ones with students where they would ask them, when did you first come to know about your sexuality? And they would write up these one-on-ones, and students were reported as having the worst one-on-ones when they said things like, none of your damn business.
Yeah, and that's a real example. And it's a male RA and a first-year student, doing their one-on-one and, being asked these creepy questions that are mandatory for the RA to ask. And she literally responded, none of your damn business, and she got written up for it, which is just crazy.
But they also had to do things in front of other people, right?
Yeah, they had group exercises. The thing that troubles me about that case to this day, and I think that, there was a situation at the University of Northern Colorado a couple years ago with a bias incident reporting system where a media outlet did a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act, and got all this information about how the system was actually being implemented. And in this case, there was someone who, remained anonymous throughout, but who supplied us with all of the training materials for the University of Delaware program. I suspect that other schools still have things like it.
Well, that's an interesting story, how we learned about Delaware, right? Because the RAs or whoever was in charge of the program distributed the materials, but then the materials had to be given back to them. But this professor...
That was the first thing that we got, was like, oh, something's wrong here if you don't want people holding on to your training.
And we know that the director of Res Life at the time was speaking, they were touting this around the country as a model. So, it's amazing that, to some degree, we are limited by what we know and what we have access to. And so it's so important that people, we need whistleblowers on the inside. We need people bringing these things to our attention. And,
we defeated that program.
We did. We defeated that program soundly.
And some folks are still mad about it.
And I guess they're lighting candles in memory of the
program. The other thing we still need are students who have some idea of their rights and the rights of their peers, so that when something terrible happens, they know to come to us. I still think that we must be seeing, maybe it's more now, but I would put it at only like 40, 50% tops of what actually happens out there.
Oh, sure.
I go to campus and I ask people, have you heard of FIRE before? I'll get maybe a third of the class that raises their hands.
Right, and there are undoubtedly all kinds of abuses. I think if folks are going to college for the first time, anyone's gone to college in their families, right? And they'll have something happen to them, and they'll think, I can shut up and just take it and get my degree, or I can make a big deal out of it. And they'll take the former every time, because the incentives are such that it's hard to stand up against your school. We've seen that again and again. I always try to remind students that the First Amendment and free speech requires some bravery, right? First of all, if you got an unpopular idea, people are going to yell at you about it. That's part of the, the cost of civic participation.
It's part of the strong student model that we talk about.
And then, but the other thing is knowing when your rights are violated in the first place, right? Knowing that you have these rights and that they can be vindicated if you're willing to be brave. That is, I think, the work that we have to do in the next 10 years.
The other case in 2007 that sticks out to me, and we talk about it quite often, is the Keith John Sampson case. He's a non-traditional student working his way through college, and he was working, I think, as a janitor or something, and he was reading a book during his lunch break called Notre Dame versus the Klan. It was about how Notre Dame defeated the Klan in the 1920s. It had some burning crosses superimposed upon Notre Dame's campus. Some students saw the burning crosses, got offended, reported him to at some office, and he was found guilty of racial harassment without so much as a hearing. And the only way we were able to get that turned around was through publishing an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal.
Well, there was a couple stages on that. Now, first of all,
I wasn't there. This was 2007 again.
Yeah, when we heard about this case, it was definitely another one where, like, seriously, this was all that happened? He was reading a book, and first of all, the book's available in the library at IUPUI. It's a overwhelmingly anti-Klan book. It's celebrating the defeat of the Klan. And as I always point out, the fact that it's an anti-Klan book doesn't make it any more or less protected. It does, however, make being punished for it more ironic. And in this case,
the books that could be found in the library, right, of the university.
So both the local ACLU and FIRE got involved in this. The university backed down. But then when someone from the Wall Street Journal wrote a column about it the following summer, they tried to come out again and say we didn't really do anything wrong and all this kind of stuff, and then they had to back down again. So it had like these two these two stages, and we partially refer to it a lot just because it's one of the fastest, most easily explained FIRE stories, because it really just is someone got in trouble because an administrator literally judged a book by its cover.
Do you remember Keith sending us things like letters to the editor he had written in the previous 10 years that were anti-racist to prove that he wasn't a racist to us? Remember that? It was heartbring.
He's such a nice guy. He spoke at one of our summer conferences.
Right, and he was upset about being punished here, but he's also upset that folks would get the wrong idea about who he was. Right? I remember, and he wore, as I recall, like a yin-yang medallion around his neck, and he was showing us these old letters to the editor, be like, guys, this isn't me. And we were like, oh man, we got a win for you, pal. Yeah.
I would like to point out 2 things about this case. One, it is still in 2018 exceedingly common, in fact, perhaps more common even than it was in 2007, for students to be able to be expelled or suspended for harassment and other serious allegations of misconduct without a hearing.
Yeah.
Still a huge problem.
Yeah.
Also, book covers continue to be a vexing thing in my life because I'm currently reading Lust on Trial, by Amy Warble.
Yeah,
Great book, so interesting. She was recently on the podcast,
yes.
right? But the cover says Lust on Trial, and it's got some scantily clad women on the front, and I had it on the coffee table, and my 8-year-old pops up, "Hey, Mom, what's lust?" Wah, wah. So, book covers to this day causing problems.
Yeah.
Well, actually, Robert had another prop that he brought when the first take, where there's technical issues, for a case he talked about at Gonzaga University involving, I guess, this book, Why the Left Hates America. I'm not too familiar with the case. Greg, you might be a little bit more familiar with it.
They said it was hate speech.
Yeah, they said it was hate speech, and their defense of it was it's hate speech because it uses the word hate, and we were just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So you're saying accusing other people of hating something is itself hate speech? So
well, I mean, technically, Greg.
So how can? But didn't you just use the H word in saying that? So
Open and shut.
We just pointed out just how absurd this was on every possible
Well,
level.
this guy, Daniel Flynn, I don't think he's related to Michael Flynn, but he was coming to speak about the book.
No, which is the
That's
title
how
of the
rumors
book.
get started.
Yeah, which is the title of the book. And apparently using the word hate now is hate speech.
Yeah.
I guess in its most literal definition, perhaps.
When I first started Fire in 2001, in addition to it being 9/11, I had this huge stack of case submissions that we'd gotten together since like 1999, because that's when Fire was founded. And going through these old cases, so many of them, were so ridiculous. Students being actually told by administrators when they are about to have a hearing, having a administrator check through the rights you're not going to get in this hearing that they promise in the books, and I literally actually, and so
really,
yeah. The kind of stuff that happened, I think, before we were founded, we'll never know quite how bad it was, but definitely from my little impression from the backlog of cases, they were pretty horrifying.
Yeah, well, that's the reason FIRE was founded in 1999, right? Because Alan Charles Kors and Harvey Silverglate wrote this book, The Shadow University, and they were just inundated with requests for help. And
oh, nice, yeah.
Yeah,
right.
I guess right behind us.
Oh, yeah.
Also available for purchase online.
Well, and you know what? It's more than that, because prior to The Shadow University, Alan defended Eden Jacobowitz in the water buffalo incident at Penn, which was one of the first sort of public cases of censorship. Following that, people started writing to him, calling him, and saying, hey, wait, this is happening elsewhere. This is happening to me, too. So he started collecting those. That was the genesis for the Shadow University.
Yeah.
And then the Shadow University and all the requests that followed that were the genesis of FIRE.
And we celebrate our 20th anniversary next year. Yep. It's very exciting. Anyway, I think we're going to wrap it up there. Since this will be a podcast, I usually end with some end notes, but I'm just going to wave that here. Everyone who
we could go long. I mean, everybody at home, we're doing you a favor. We could talk for another 2-3 hours.
Totally.
Yeah.
But I think we have a staff lunch for the staff retreat. So I just want to thank you guys again for participating in this, and thanking Aaron and Chris again for recording and filming it. And you can find, if you're listening to this in podcast form, you can find the video on YouTube at youtube.com/thefired.org.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.